Study me, if you wish. Assess my postures, my phrases, the pauses in my speech. Name the shade of brown on my back. Note, like an obscure island, the birthmark on my chest. Measure the length of my hair, the pitch of my voice, my silence when I anger. Memorize my poems. Speak them on streetcars and subways. Hold me inside your ribs. Do what you must do to love me.
Yeah, it's a difficult question to answer in a certain way, but I understand spoken word poetry to be basically a relationship between silence and sound. For me, spoken word means that the things that I write, I have the desire to share on stage in a live context. So the choices that one makes when you know that a poem is going to be live and in performance are a little bit different. So I have to ask myself, both in the writing process and in the performance process, who am I speaking to? Why do I wish to share these words? Why do I wish to give them away? How does the act of speaking the poem bring new meaning to it? You know, how does the poem live differently in my voice than it does on the page, for instance? But from a writing standpoint, spoken word poetry is no different than any other form of poetry. But from the stage, I get to ask myself, how would I like to manipulate the silence in this room? You know, it's a very special place or a special context to exist in. It might sound a little bit abstract, but for me, the writing process begins in feeling, and then my job as a poet is to organize those feelings and experiences in a way that allows me to write them down and like transmit the meaning of them in words. For instance, if I'm in a coffee shop, what I'm doing is like making myself really open to everybody else in the room. If there's a baby in the room and the baby smiles, I'm taking that in. If there's a conversation happening to my right and those people in conversation are like very stressed out, I'm listening to the stress in that conversation. Really, the first goal for artistry of any sort, but particularly for writing, is the ability to empathize. So the first thing I'm doing is empathizing. Once I've empathized, once I feel like I understand what it is I'm feeling, I'm asking myself, what are the pictures I can use to describe these feelings? So when I say pictures, I mean to say that my poetry is very image-based, like my poetry starts in imagery. So I'm asking, what are the things from the real world that I can like use to create images that will allow me to like imply these feelings? And so once that happens, then I'm saying to myself, how can I only say what is absolutely necessary to say? So like taking out all the unnecessary words within those images, such that I'm able to be like direct. So I'm able to like transmit the images in a very direct way. And this process can take hours, but that's really what it is. For me, if I were to like very much simplify the process, it would be feel something, see something, like imagine a picture in my mind. Be sure to make that image distilled, direct, efficient. And so if I'm able to efficiently describe a series of pictures that imply feelings, then I have a poem. Because I was raised and educated in Canada, so many of the poets that I gravitate towards tend to be Canadian, not because I ideologically prefer them, but just because the nature of my education has like tended to emphasize Canadian poetry, and because Canadian poetry is easier to find in Canadian bookstores. So I mean, it's simple that way. Dionne Brand is my favorite poet. She's a poet who was born in Trinidad and Tobago, who came to Canada, I believe, in the 70s, spent most of her time living in Toronto. I appreciate her because I come from a Caribbean background. My father's from Jamaica, my mother's from Barbados, and I was enamored with her at first because even when she's speaking about other things, I can hear the music of the ocean in her work, like the way that she controls rhythm and makes her poems move back and forth, and the way that they sound reminded me of the ocean. And I wasn't raised near the ocean, but it's somewhere in my blood, I think. So she reminds me of the intensity and the beauty and the harshness of the islands. So she might always be my favorite poet. Then there's Leonard Cohen, who I appreciate mostly for his spirituality, like the way that his poems often sound like prayers, or that the relationship between his humanity and the words on the page seems very intimate and delicately created. And so I find a lot of beauty in that. And then Michael Ondaatje, who's a poet who was born in Sri Lanka, and he's a mixed race poet. And what I appreciate about his poetry is just kind of the pure sweetness and elegance of it. Of all the poetry that I've read, he has the ability to create images that are very delicate but manage to be very sweet. Between the years of 2011 and 2014, I would say he was my primary influence, because I was trying to create poetry that was sincere and sweet. I would try to write poems that felt like mango juice, which is to say a little bit thick, very consciously sweet. And so Michael Ondaatje, in the richness of his writing, is one of the sweetest poets that I have ever encountered. When we talk about the particular experiences that have shaped me as an artist, for me it's important to talk about the influence of my physical disability. So I was born with a disability called cerebral palsy. I don't know specifically what the effect of that disability has been on me, but I know that it's been large. So I think what I often say is that because of being viewed often with a lens of difference, so people are looking at me, trying to figure me out, from a young age, it kind of made me sensitive to trying to figure out the world around me, trying to make sure that I had a gaze that would look back at the world and have something to say. Secondly, through spoken word and through something called slam poetry, I've been influenced in a major way. Slam poetry is a competitive form of spoken word. You're given 3 minutes to present an original piece of poetry, and then 5 randomly selected judges from the audience will score your poem from a scale from 0 to 10. And so I did that in my former hometown of Ottawa, and in the year 2009, I made the team that represented Ottawa at the Canadian Festival of Spoken Word. So that's bringing together all the spoken word communities in Canada to compete against one another. And so in 2009, me and 4 other poets, we were the winners of the national poetry competition. So that was a big experience for me, not because we won, but because of the process of working with 3 other very intelligent, very loving black males in a creative context. After 2009, we continued under the name of The Recipe, and so The Recipe was a group that was able to tour Canada 3 or 4 times together. And so just the intimacy of touring the country with people who are also accomplished poets, and figuring out how to challenge each other and love each other and be honest about what we need in our creative lives, taught me everything about what it means to be an honest artist. It taught me everything about what it means to be an ambitious artist, how to be a professional, how to invest your poetry with love at all times. As a performer, how to make sure you're taking care of the audience, how to make sure you're considering them. I will say moving to Edmonton has also been a beautiful, strange, important experience in my life. I uprooted my life in the summer of 2015 because I fell in love with a woman who lives in Edmonton. And the process of learning to love that woman and learning to love this city has stretched me a lot. It's let me know all the things I don't know about myself that I thought I knew about myself. And this is important mostly in the sense that I believe that an artist can only grow creatively to the extent that they're growing spiritually. And so, like, the particular challenges of Edmonton have made me a better writer because they've made me reflect in more honest ways about what I want and about what I need from community, about what I need from the people who love me, and about how to access that love in a more consistent way. Because Edmonton is not an easy place to live in, but it can be a place that's full of love if you try hard enough. And so there's no way that I can divorce my love from my creativity. And so whatever Edmonton teaches me about love will eventually move into the poetry and hopefully make my poetry more potent. So thank you, Edmonton, for being the strange, beautiful, and difficult place that you are. Yeah. The reason I'm a poet, I think, is because writing and speaking were the first two gifts that anybody ever told me I had. So, like, as a very young person, I've kind of always known that I have a capacity for speaking and a capacity for writing. And so if I want to live well, and if I want to live honestly, and if I want to contribute to communities, I have to understand the value of these gifts, because I've always had them, you know? In like the most fundamental way, poetry is the way that I investigate what my power is as a human being. Standing on stage and speaking a poem from my heart and having this thing that I wrote for myself, or this thing that I wrote from my heart, influence strangers, you know, like to be on stage and see people in the audience cry, or to have people tell me that I've really touched them in a certain way. If you've had those experiences often enough, it's impossible to then go through life feeling powerless. What I'd like to make happen is to use my gifts to help us build more love, you know, help people build community, help people access the love that they need, help people understand that they are powerful too, in ways that they might not be imagining at the present moment. So a lot of my work in life right now is as a poetry teacher, so somebody who creates classes and helps people kind of tap into the poetry that's already within them. And I think if I can use my gifts to help people know themselves, we can love more and change things that we need to change. It's vast. It's a broad mission. It's not that I necessarily want to be the most famous poet, but I believe poets have a role in society. I am Brandon Wint, and I'm very grateful to be Brandon Wint. I am a poet. I am somebody who is searching for honest stories, searching to tell my own stories honestly. I am a lover. I am somebody who wishes to help. I am somebody who can speak. I'm somebody who can write. I'm somebody who tries to be sensitive and loving. I am a dreamer. Yeah, very much a dreamer. I am a person of ideas. Yeah, that's who I am, I think. Yeah, I'm also the son of a woman from Barbados and a man from Jamaica, and that's really important. But I really am a poet. Like in every way that I think a person can be a poet, I'm a poet. I'm trying to find the poetry of life, and I'm trying to write it down and embody it and express it in every moment. So that's who I am today. Mm-hmm.